time, the 10th annual Sync Up Conference. Give yourselves a round of applause for being here. Here at the beautiful George and Joyce Wein Jazz and Heritage Center in downtown New Orleans, Louisiana. As you know, the Sync Up Conference is a presentation of the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation, which is the nonprofit that owns the Jazz Fest. And our role is to use the money from Jazz Fest for programs that we do all year long in the areas of education, economic development, and cultural enrichment. And now, for our next panel, thank you. Said that once or twice. This panel is on the topic of getting your music into non-traditional film and TV projects. The name of this conference is Sync Up. So we have talked many times, and Josh, you're a veteran of several of these conversations. We've talked many times here at the Sync Up conference about sync licensing, getting your music into film and TV. So it is a subject that is often discussed, but today we're going to talk a little bit about a different aspect of it, of getting into, we know that getting your music into film and television requires access to a certain network, but there are other ways to get a foot in the door with licensing music, because so often independent artists especially see it as such an important revenue stream as well as such an important audience building tool. And we have on our panel today, we have Josh Rabinowitz, who is the Executive Vice President and Director of Music at Townhouse, an ad agency in New York, formerly known as the Grey Group or something like that, or the name-changing stuff. But you've produced thousands, more than 8,000 tracks for film and video, and have a lot of experience in organizing music for visual media. Sitting next to you is our friend Darcy McKinnon from the New Orleans Video Access Center, who is the brains and programmer behind the Sync Up Cinema Conference, which is
2 days away.
As always, it's the Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday between Jazz Fest weekend, so you've got 3 days full of, I was going to say screamings. You have screenings and screaming, and panel discussions and keynotes and social events that you've organized, but you are also an educator, and you are somebody that works very, very hard to help train and edify those people working in the film industry, especially the independent filmmakers of Louisiana, so thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And also Sarah Bromberg, who has a long history in the music business, working with record labels, and now also is primarily focused on helping artists and independent artists break through and getting their music licensed into film and TV productions. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So Sarah, actually, if you wouldn't mind, could you just kind of give us the 30-second primer on if you're going the traditional route, what are the things that you need to keep in mind? What are the licenses that you need to be aware of? And who are the people that you need to be targeting? So we just make sure that we kind of cover some of those traditional bases before we go off script.
I would say 3 main things for artists and songwriters who want to get their music into film and television is, number 1, have all of your rights organized. Know who owns the rights to your master, meaning the recording that you made. Who owns the rights to that? Everybody who played on it has signed a release to say that you full out own the rights to that master recording. And then on the publishing side, meaning if you wrote a song that was recorded, whether it was by you or by someone else, have your publishing organized, meaning there is a piece of paper in some form that everybody has signed who was involved in the creating of that song that says this is the ownership of that song. If you don't have a publisher, that's totally fine, but you need your rights to be organized in order for them to be licensed for film or television. A song that does not have its rights organized is completely toxic for a music supervisor and for any show, any production, no matter how big or how small. If there's potentially a lawsuit because the rights are not organized, then your song will not be used. So that's the first 2 things. And the second thing that I would say, which is what I did when I worked for a label and I was reaching out to music supervisors, is I tried to find shows that I felt that my music worked with. So you want to target shows that actually have a sound that your music might help. So if you're reaching out to a show and all they use is rap and you have a jazz album, it's really not helpful for the music supervisor to receive your music in that way, and they're not going to listen to it, and they're not going to pay attention, and it's not going to get used. But if you can say, hey, I have this song, it's just like the style of music you use on your show, all of my rights are organized, it's one stop, it's easy, clear, I can give it to you for a great price, and I can turn around the clearance really easily. Here's some of my music, it's organized very well, it's MP3s, they're labeled clearly. You might actually have a chance of that music supervisor listening to your music and using it, because music supervisors are always looking for stuff that's easy, clear, no matter how big the show that they're working on is. I worked on a show called The Get Down, which was on Netflix, and we had an absolutely huge multi-million-dollar music budget, and we needed songs that were super easy to clear and super cheap, just like any other show. So that's always helpful for music supervisors. So those three basic things, I would say, are the first few steps on a traditional route to get your music used.
What would you pitch for Duck Dynasty? No, can you just remind folks what a music supervisor is and what that role is?
So a music supervisor is the person on a film or television show or really any video content whatsoever who deals with all of the music that is used against pictures. So you use generally just a little bit you deal with score, but for the most part what you deal is licensed music. Any music that's sung on camera or performed on camera or created for the show or used as a source needle drop in a deep background scene in a country bar. Any type of music used in the show, the music supervisor deals with potentially both creatively and also on the licensing front to clear everything for music against picture.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Darcy, you work with independent filmmakers, and you also, through the work that you do, work with a lot of independent musicians. Are there some avenues that you have seen that have been helpful for musicians, especially in terms of getting their music into films, especially if they may not have access to the music supervisors, which, can we all stipulate that the music supervisors group tends to be in Hollywood and tends to be a very small and insular group?
Mostly LA, but New York and LA, and it is a very small community. I wouldn't say it's insular. I would say it's definitely, people are always looking for more contacts and looking for more music, but it is very small for sure, and it is hard to break into if you don't quite know what you're doing. It can be a little difficult.
And if you don't know those individuals,
yeah,
and you don't know them where they will return your call, where they will listen to something that
you have to do a lot of cold emails, and not all of them go through, and not all of them are answered.
So Darcy, what are some of the things that you've seen folks who can't necessarily get to those music supervisors in New York, like Josh, or the ones in LA?
Well, I would say if you are interested in that and you do exactly what has been proposed, that a great way to figure out who the music supervisor is on a big show is to get an IMDb Pro account. IMDb is the Internet Movie Database. It lists all the crew positions for shows in production, and also understanding that music supervision is generally happening in post. So whereas there's a lot of film and television production here in Louisiana, the majority of the post work is not here in Louisiana. So again, in terms of timing, figuring out when a show that you're interested in is actually going to be posted, so that's when they're doing the song selection.
How much does one of those pro accounts cost?
It's a monthly subscription fee. It's not much. And again, it's something that if you're in the industry and you want to create a profile for yourself, and you're going to want to have that so you can create your own profile eventually as well. Locally, it's funny. It's not even a matter of not having access to a music supervisor. If there's a piece of advice that independent filmmakers don't take from me on the regular, it's hire a lawyer and hire a music supervisor. They rarely budget for that expense, and it's something that kind of frequently doesn't come up in an independent filmmaker's original visioning of their budget and plan for the film. So a lot of times you'll find independent filmmakers arriving at post-production not having money to license really effectively or a real plan for it. A lot of Kickstarters you'll see for independent films will be to raise money for post and music rights. So what I would say about that is I really liked what Mark Broussard said in the previous panel about content. I will also do...
He also said lie, cheat, and steal your way to the top.
Also true. I'll do a shameless self-promotion. We make free music videos for musicians with local filmmakers. And with
some grant funding
with funding from Jazz and Heritage Foundation every spring. And the thing I think I want people to understand is that a music video is a calling card and a business card for a filmmaker as well. So a great way to establish a relationship with a filmmaker is to have a kind of music that appeals to the sensibility of a local filmmaker, and y'all make a music video together. Then they know you, you've established a way of working together, you understand their visual style and what they're interested in, and that's a relationship that can continue. In terms of finding filmmakers, I think today in New Orleans, as opposed to 15 years ago, if you're at a bar or a restaurant and you see someone who looks like a musician, they're probably also or as likely to be a filmmaker. There's a lot of independent filmmakers, and if they look like a hip young person who's into art stuff, they're likely to be a filmmaker. So I think having, talking to people.
Wait, so you're saying we all have to start wearing man buns and things like
yes,
that?
Yes, indeed. And they usually have like some.
Sarah's working on it.
So I think, befriending filmmakers, finding out, just like in music, there are, a million cinematic genres, and there are people who make, specialize in horror films, or people who specialize in moody, atmospheric folktale revisions, and people who specialize in crime films, and those are all going to have different musical signatures to them, and they'll have a different interest in different types of music. So finding those filmmakers is key. A way to do that is to attend the now myriad independent film events that are happening in New Orleans. Next week, Sync Up Cinema is going to be the third film festival in a row. There was Patois Human Rights Festival, there was the French Film Festival, now this. The New Orleans Film Festival, which happens in October every year, is a great place to meet independent filmmakers, and there's a big local focus on that as well. So if you're looking to partner with independent local filmmakers, you need to go see their films, and usually because the screenings are not as frequent for an independent filmmaker, they'll be there. They're excited to have their film screened. So go to film screenings, and when you see a genre or a type of film where you're like, my music would have been perfect for that, find that filmmaker.
So, and not to, beat this plug like a dead horse, but just next week, we are going to have Sync Up Cinema, and right out here in our courtyard, there are going to be some networking and cocktail parties. So independent musicians, that's going to be a great opportunity for them to, have a drink with people who are making films and, in all likelihood, looking for music that they can get for very inexpensively, right?
Yeah, and 2 p.m. on Monday, we're having Best of the Fest, which is like 9 short films that won prizes at local film festivals over the past year. So those are going to be the top films created locally in the past year, and those filmmakers will likely be here. So,
Josh.
Hi.
Hey, buddy.
How are you?
All right. It's been a while.
Yeah.
A year, I guess.
It's been a year.
Okay. Well, it's good to see you. Welcome back to Sync Up.
Thank you. I've been to every one.
Every one.
Every one.
Wow. All right. Well, happy birthday to us.
Yeah. It's my birthday. It's my birthday too.
Today?
Today.
You don't have any money on you. All right. Who's got a pin? Who's good? Who's got a 20?
I'll take a 20.
Jazz Fest expensive.
I know, man. More than 10 years ago.
Yes, that's true. So, what are some of the avenues that you're encountering now? Because you're obviously, fully entrenched in the traditional music licensing world. You have licensed thousands of tracks. You have been involved with producing thousands of tracks for big budget commercials. But there is this whole other kind of outside world where musicians who are looking for a break, and also sometimes maybe a little additional revenue, can figure out how to get their foot in the door of getting their music synced up with some visual media. So what are some of the insider tricks that you know about?
There's some great tricks, and what's interesting is the waters I swim in, it's advertising, and you think big budgets all the time, and it's a global corporation, and they're spending 6 figures or 7 figures licensing a Beatles song or Led Zeppelin or a Who song. That's just a small part of it. The major part of it, the most significant amount of work, is the smaller budget stuff. I work in an agency where we do maybe 500 jobs a year, which is a lot of work. Much of it is done with library music, and that's a really significant thing for people to look into. It's also known as stock music. There's like stock footage that filmmakers will use, other media producers will use. But stock music, library music, is a really hugely successful aspect of the music business. And what the people that kind
Production music libraries.
production music library, stock music library. Some of the more famous ones or most successful ones are Extreme Music, APM, which is Associated Production Music, Audio Network, 5 Alarm Music. There are so many.
But can an artist really actually make money from being in a library? Because you always think of library music as being like the cheapest possible option.
Well,
But
they
for the
can.
artist, they can actually get paid?
Yeah, they can. As long as your rights are kind of set up, like Sarah said, and you're dealing with some of these companies, they license tracks multiple times. If your track has kind of that magic, that fairy dust around it, that kind of hooky or kind of trendy sound, it could be used in as many as like 10, 20 pieces of media a year. And some of these production libraries, to your kind of question, they don't really care about the upfront money as much as the back end money. And the back end is pretty tasty. If you get something in a major show and the person is paying for the show, I don't know what you pay normally for like the get down if you're using a piece of library music.
Yeah, we paid $1,000 for each library queue. But on this note, I do want to say, because I always bring this up, that something like this, an example, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which is a show that's had, I think, 12 seasons at this point, is fully in syndication, available on Hulu. I mean, DVDs, I mean, there's a huge cult following. Their entire score is from Extreme Music. So those writers that wrote the little bell song, do 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 do, yeah, they get paid every time It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia plays anywhere. So they're making good money on the back end.
They're making
so you
good money.
Can.
And these libraries are always looking for music. They want to have these huge, a huge database, a huge arsenal of music, and they're being sold to one another. So people are buying these libraries to help aggregate these huge companies. And it's something, I have friends that have been successful in putting together companies, aggregating music, and then selling them to bigger publishers. So a lot of the major publishers, like Sony ATV, which is the biggest publisher in the world, they own Extreme Music. APM is owned by EMI Music, which is part of Sony ATV. 5 Alarm Music is owned by BMG, the biggest music companies in the world. And the reason these companies exist is because there's a real use for them. So they're always looking for music. And you think about reality TV shows, they're always using library music.
Oh.
And it's amazing how much music they do use in a show. It can be, I haven't worked on a reality show, I know some people that have. They might use as much as 10 or 15 cues on a show, even like a few seconds. And it's all about the back end. There are many music companies on the production music side, they don't care about the front end money at all. They don't care if they get a licensing fee for it. They just want to deal with the back
They'll
end.
give it away for free.
They'll give it away for free. There's a company called Jingle Punks that some people may have heard of. It's a great name, and they're a solid company. They give a lot of their music away for free, and they sometimes say, it says at the end of the show, music provided by Jingle Punks.
So how does a person figure out how to approach some of these now, conglomerate-owned, also kind of a small circle of companies? How do you figure out how to get your music into a library?
It's really, I don't think it's that hard. The music has to be appropriate. It's not like you're reaching out to an A&R guy or an A&R woman at a major label who's like, hardly ever going to return your call and is always busy working on their specific projects and schmoozing, et cetera. You're dealing with a small company, generally. Extreme Music, probably the biggest, most successful of the production. It's not a big company. They have a New York office and an LA office.
But I mean, do they have like a, submit button on their website? And so an independent
do,
artist
yeah,
from
most
New
of them
Orleans
make
could
it
just
very
go to their
easy.
website and say, hey, you want to check them
Yeah,
out?
almost every company that Josh just named does have pretty much that in one form or another. Submit music here, and
And they'll actually call you back?
Yeah, they'll listen to it because they need music, and if you spend, most of these libraries you can listen to without becoming a member of them. You can listen to the stuff that's on there, listen to the ones that might fit your music best, and submit it, and you might be a lock, really. And they'll tag it and they'll put it in there so it's easy for people to search and choose on their own, but then also they do searching as well. They have people there. I submit searches to music libraries because I don't feel like looking through the libraries on my own, and I just send a link to what I need, and I say, what you got like this, and they send me 30 tracks back. So they actively will pitch their music. Yeah. your
You know what? You said the TV show that uses all library music. You know the Monday Night Football theme, bum 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 bum. That's stock music. That's library music, and it's
I didn't know
licensed
that.
all the time. All the time, you can get a license for it for like $750 in perpetuity for an ad campaign, and that's pretty reasonable. And then they play it over and over again. So the rights holders on that, they've made a killing.
So should people be writing songs that only last 4 beats?
They do cut downs for you.
Or just have a really good 4-beat section in it.
Could do.
So Josh, you brought a clip.
Yeah, I brought a clip.
Which is the first one that we have up?
Yeah, the Apple commercial's interesting.
Okay, why don't you tell us about this and tell us why you brought it?
Yeah, so a friend of mine, Keith Darcy, who works at a publisher, and
Who's a veteran speaker of Sync Up?
he came one year, yeah, and he was great. He works for Songs Publishing, and I was talking to him. I was like, I'm doing this panel. I'm trying to find some really unique success stories that kind of happened in a non-traditional way. And essentially, the band is called Stolen Jars. I don't know if some people know them. It's a guy called Cody and this other woman, and they just make music and kind of proliferate the music. And it was sent out to various people, and one blog had made a statement about it. This music's really cool. We love this music. I don't even know which blog it was. And the music supervisors out there, many of them are steeped in kind of creating original music and producing music. But I'd say most of them these days are more steeped in kind of licensing music and finding that thing. And a lot of us, what we're trying to do is that thing, that kind of, that magical thing that nobody's heard before. You want to be like the first one to find it, get it to be used in an ad, and then all of a sudden it explodes. And Apple, which is the biggest marketer, the most successful kind of entity in culture, I think, it's certainly when it surrounds music meets technology. One of the music supervisors there just found it on this blog and used it, and it's really changed kind of the career path for this band. So I thought it would be really cool, just think about how your music can be recognized by a blog, like a very kind of indie blog. And there are people, the gatekeepers like us, that are looking for music, and we're going to look anywhere we can.
Is that something that you actually do in your world, though? I mean, are you out on when you're, being paid your 11-figure salary in your corner office in a penthouse in Manhattan?
Manhattan? Brooklyn.
Are you actually spending your time cruising the internet and looking at, reading blogs about, like, obscure alternative bands from Dubuque or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, we're geeks, man. We're geeky.
I can tell.
I have a team of 5 of us, all geeked out in different kind of aspects of music. I'll say to some of the guys on my team, yeah, I'm going to New Orleans for the Jazz and Heritage Festival, and they're like, that's cool, but that's not what I'm into at all. I'm into this. I'm going to this conference, or I'm going to this show, and they're checking out music all over the place. It really is about finding something special. And certainly for Apple, that's the most important thing for them.
All right. Well, Jason? Sorry, we don't have
That's cool.
cutting back on expenses.
Send a note. Stay informed. Catch a show. Make your point. Make a memory. Make a masterpiece. Read something. Watch something. And learn something. Do it all more beautifully with the Retina display on iPad.
Very simple piece of music.
Yeah.
Not very distinctive.
How much do you think that band got paid for that?
Well, Apple's unique, and they don't really have to pay you very much. They don't pay Coldplay or U2 much money at all. It's about the exposure and the discovery. But there's one more of these that I'd love to play. If the VW one, Synchronicity it's called, it's shot in New Orleans. I don't know if we have that up there.
So while Jason's setting that up, why don't you give us the explanation for why you chose this clip?
So you were speaking about like film production. The post-production world is a really significant world. And I think if you're an aspiring musician or composer or artist, it's great to connect with people in the post-production world. And what's the post-production world? Editors, people that are kind of editing film together, whether they're doing it with whatever type of Avid or Final Cut or any kind of digital tools. The editors are, in my business, people that have a lot of power because people are sitting with a piece of film over and over again, and a piece of music is placed on it, and it just turns out that that piece of music is the only piece of music you can use. It's perpetually being played.
Yeah, I think that happens all the time where someone who's editing the film puts a piece of temp music, right? Like this is just for timing and edit beats, and you put it in, and then the other filmmaking team walks in and they're like, "Oh, it's perfect," and you're like, "Oh, we don't have
That's
rights to
called
this."
temp love.
Right. Temp love, demo love,
Yeah.
and then you're screwed.
Yeah,
But-
and then you have to bail out
But
money.
will they ever be using like some indie band for something like that, or are they only
1,000.
using like Aerosmith or whatever?
No, they'll
Editors sit in the dark and are also nerds.
Yeah,
and
they're nerds
yeah,
too,
they're nerding out on the music that they think is going to be
Yeah.
editable to it.
And as a music supervisor, a music producer, et cetera, what we try to do is get editors music that is available, that we can afford, because we don't want them to put a piece of music by Coldplay up on a spot. There's absolutely no way we're going to have a budget for it.
Or a small indie band who didn't have their rights cleared or has like a sample in it that isn't cleared or something. Same thing. I mean,
So
that's
even just for
as
the
bad
temp,
that's just
they'll
as
know
bad.
that. Even just
Yeah.
for the temp, they'll know that they have to use something that is.
Well,
that,
they won't know. They'll put whatever they want against picture, and then it would be up to the music supervisor to sort it out on the back end, which is why I would pray that people would have their rights sorted before they go to their editors and give their music.
Well, just,
But I also want to insert here, like that is an opportunity for musicians as well, which is to say, like right now, my young editor interns at Novak want to cut everything to Nobody Speak by Run the Jewels because it's amazingly fast, right? It's a great editing, like experimental music video style thing. We're never going to make anything with Run the Jewels music. Novak can't afford it. But if there's a musician who knows a filmmaker and knows that this is what they're cutting to, and you can compose something that has that same time signature and that same urgency, but it's a completely original piece of music that someone could afford, that becomes an opportunity.
That's exactly what happened in this particular case. In Boston, they were editing together some VW work for the ad agency. There was a guy named Peter who worked in the post-production facility where they were doing it. They were cutting something together, and the editor said, "Do you have any music? I'm looking just for some music that has like a pulse to it." And he's like, "Yeah, I can just give you something. I write music, kind of on the side." And he gave him this thing that has a beat. The spot is really cool because it's all about the synchronicity of the beat and certain things happening. And it developed a career for the guy. The commercial was very successful. It won a lot of awards. It's very compelling. And it started a career for a guy. And that's the thing. It's like you're aligning yourself. You have your kind of eye on the prize, but it's not always like a direct connection from point A to point B. You have to kind of go laterally and crisscross and connect with people that are part of the process. It's not necessarily like me, the music producer or the music supervisor.
Use your mic.
Oh, sorry, it's not like me, the music producer or the music supervisor. It's other people that are involved in production. And there's so many creative, thoughtful people that are involved in this stuff, and they want to do something really great. So if we can play that one, is that cool?
I don't know. We'll tell you if it's cool in a minute.
Hopefully you guys think it's cool. It's old.
The scenery may be familiar.
That was interesting.
The Volkswagen Jetta. Sometimes everything just comes together. On the road of life, there are passengers and there are drivers.
So the guy sweeping the floor in the post house wrote that music and got discovered because somebody said, "Hey, you know anybody that knows that?"
Yes, and the woman that did the voiceover, they had done all this auditioning for voiceovers, and the woman who ended up getting it was the receptionist. And they just said, "Oh, can you come in and just speak? We can't find that." They did these auditions with all these
Is that
professional
because
voiceovers.
somebody had heard her voice on the hold? Like press 7 to reach the.
Or she did the temp record, and they were like, "Yeah, that works."
Yeah, and that's pretty serious money in residuals.
Wow, that's amazing.
it's a cool spot, right? It's good.
Yes, that's very cool. Does anybody have any questions for the panel? Can you come up and use the mic if you don't mind?
While he's coming up, I also wanted to mention another genre that we haven't talked about, which is documentary work. Especially here in New Orleans, there's loads of music documentaries. I was just thinking, I know of 3 documentaries in production right now that are going to focus on the 90s hip-hop culture. There's Zach Manuel's Blood Thicker, which is about the sons of some famous New Orleans rappers. Our friend Ben Simmons is doing a documentary on the Bally Animal shoe. And I'm actually producing Nayla Jefferson's documentary about the Glenn Metz case that all happened around 93, 94, which is also the era where Cash Money Records emerged. And all of those films are going to be licensing music from that era. All of those filmmakers, myself included, are going to have to make choices about which songs we can afford, which ones we can't. And I guarantee you there's going to be moments where we're going to need somebody to be like, can you make a track that evokes this era so we can use that for fill-in music throughout? So those things are happening too. There's loads of money in. So if you had a hit in 94 or had a hit in the past or had a song that's really particular to an era, especially in New Orleans, there's going to be lots of opportunities to license that too, which is another chance for you. It's not only music you're going to make, it's music you did make that you need to clean up your rights and make sure.
But documentaries generally don't have a lot of money to spend on licensing a track.
Documentaries frequently do not budget for music as well. But in some famous cases we know, like Lily Keeber's Bayou Maharaja, she went through a festival run with some temporary licenses and then used that festival run to raise $90,000 to clear all the licenses of the Booker music.
But that was all one specific artist.
It was one specific artist and one specific donor, actually. So it's not an area, again, where you're going to make loads of money, but I will also say right now, in particular, nationally, there is a focus on documentary producers in the South. We had 3 local filmmakers at the Tribeca Film Institute just recently. There's definitely an acknowledgement on the coasts that they need to look for producers who are working in the areas that they're filming. In the world of documentary, a lot more local filmmakers are getting chances to do things like ITVS, which is the funding arm of PBS, which is national distribution. And if you get ITVS funding, you do get a music budget. So it's certainly not a guarantee, but if you're working with someone who is a high-quality, emerging filmmaker, again, that's a relationship that could bloom into something else later.
Yeah, and if it ends up on HBO, and every time someone clicks on demand, you get a little money on the back end that can add up as well. So
More than a Spotify royalty.
Sorry?
More than a Spotify
A little
royalty.
bit
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, I just had a question because I noticed in both of those clips actually that there was no lyrics in that. So how important is that? Like, do you prefer stuff without lyrics or with lyrics, or does it depend on what the content is with the ad? Like if it's something about different colors of a phone,
Depends, I'd say.
Yeah.
Depends,
Okay.
but always good to have instrumentals of your work available when you do your sessions. Bounce out instrumental waves and MP3s, because always useful, and vocal only too, for editing purposes, always useful.
Gotcha.
But I would say it fully just depends on if there's a lot of VO in the spot or talking. It just depends on a lot of things, but yeah.
Cool.
Another question.
Hey, I work with a lot of bands here, and especially in Nashville. I used to live in Nashville for a long time. And a lot of them are recording on budgets just for the independent sake. But I've heard so much about how important quality mastering is if you ever want your music to be in any sort of sync situation. So, like, just from an audio quality, what you guys are looking for, what would you say are, like, the top most important things, like if you're going to spend a little more money to make sure that your recording is up to snuff, like, so to speak?
I mean, for me, it doesn't necessarily matter. Pardon me. Sometimes we're looking for things that are really raw and that are not like fully mixed. Sometimes the music is, I hate to use the phrase, as ignorable as it is interesting, but music is ducked down often. There's a lot of people talking. There's dialogue, VO, like you're saying. There's a concept that just needs a feeling, and it doesn't have to be like super duper uber mixed. But then there are times when it does. Many times it's really the feeling, kind of the sentiment of the music, because that's what's driving, that's what it is. In a commercial, in a piece of film, in a piece of media, the music is the emotion, If you take out the music, all of a sudden, you're like, how am I supposed to feel? So, to me, it doesn't really matter.
Will you ever pay to go in and remix a track if you like it, but it's not up to snuff?
Yeah, and there are budgets. There's a post-production budget for every single commercial that's done. They're willing to spend the money to make sure that everything's mixed well. You know, there's a lot of audio elements. There might be some sound effects. There might be some literal sound design or some soundscapes. There's a voiceover. There's some dialogue. There could be multiple pieces of music. You have to make it all work. So that does happen anyway. The final mix is kind of the equivalent of a mastering thing. So that goes down pretty often.
Cool.
So I say, don't worry about it.
All right.
All right, save that money. Yes, another question.
Yeah, I know you probably answered this question already, but I missed it. How do you get your music into the library that you was talking about?
You could reach out and connect, look them up, do a lot of research, figure out what some of the major libraries are and some of the ones in development. There's always news. You can Google it and see which libraries are acquiring which libraries or which publishers are acquiring which libraries. And, you know, they all have websites, and you can submit to the websites. It's pretty straightforward.
Okay. Can you name a few of the websites?
Well, I would suggest looking into places like Audio Network, Extreme Music, APM, 5 Alarm. Can you name some more?
You just need Opus One.
Music Box.
I think isn't Audio Socket right locally?
Audio Socket?
They're not really a library,
Yeah.
but they do assist with helping independent artists
Yeah.
get their music into visual media.
Oh, Score is a good one in LA, and Jingle Punks, which you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, there are so many. I mean, sometimes I just spend like 5 or 10 minutes just kind of doing crazy Google searches, and I come up with all the information. And you can usually find the people pretty easily to connect with, if not just the submit area on the site.
Thank you.
And the video from this panel discussion, as with all of the Sync Up Music panel discussions, will be posted on our YouTube channel. Give us about a week, until a week after Jazz Fest or so. We ought to be able to make it happen by then. So you'll be able to reference this one more time. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Kevin Penn. I'm a hip-hop artist. I want to hear some numbers. What's the lowest you ever seen an indie artist maybe be paid for a placement inside of a film? And
You want to know the lowest, or do you want to know the highest?
I want to know both of them.
Lowest is 0, for sure.
It's not less than 0.
We haven't had anybody pay us to use our music, but definitely 0 is lowest.
But hey, it's not too late. It could happen.
It just depends on the show. I mean, if you're working, if it's a major motion picture, if it's a studio film, there's more money available. The fees are higher. There are so many factors that go into what a fee is.
Right.
Personally, what's the highest I've seen an completely independent artist get paid?
Go ahead, tell me.
Probably like $15,000 aside for like a television use for a fully independent artist.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think that also has to do with everything that was just talked about in the previous panel of like having everything correct? Like if you are sent a cold demo, are you going to Google that artist and see what else is there, and you want to see that they have a website or a Facebook or a SoundCloud following, and like is that how you kind of create that mental library?
I mean, I personally do look at that stuff just because I think it's interesting. But even if this artist has 3 followers on Facebook, but if the director really likes the song and the budgets are what the budgets are, you're still gonna pay even if
you could just get to make the call and say it's your lucky day.
I worked on an independent film, and we used a lot of the music called Youth in Oregon. We used a lot of the music from the producers and the directors' friends, and none of them had big followings anywhere, but we paid them to use their music.
I have the inverse story of a documentary I worked on about 10 years ago, and it was about Tijuana, Mexico. And while we were filming, we befriended a band called Nortec, which was a collective of DJs and electronic musicians. And their whole thing was that they remixed traditional Mexican norteño music with EDM beats. And they were kind of just starting while we were filming. We became friends. We went drinking and eating with them all the time. And we selected one of their songs because they were a fit and we liked them. We built a whole scene in this documentary around it, which was a time lapse of a factory being built, and it went exactly to the beat. It was completely timed out. And it takes a long time to make a documentary, and like 2 years later, I'm up in the morning and I'm watching television and a Volvo commercial comes on and I hear the Nortec song and I'm like, oh shit, we're gonna have to recut that whole scene. But rights were in order, and they were such good people that they were able to talk to their publisher and talk to everybody involved, and we were actually able to use the song and they were happy to do it because they had the Volvo monies, so they weren't hurting.
On the high end, I can't speak to the specific numbers for things that we've licensed that have been really expensive. But I do know that when an agency or an advertiser or a corporation is doing their licensing and they don't have someone that really understands the music thing, they sometimes will spend way more money than they really should have spent. And it speaks to kind of what musical expertise and experience and relationships, the value of those relationships. You hear, I've heard of deals that were made that were certainly twice as much money as they should have been. Because someone's like, wow, that's a really famous person. I guess we have to get that money. And then they are able to get that money. And that's the irony. Sometimes there's no money, and then all of a sudden no money turns into some more money. But I don't know if that's helpful.
Are these deals, like, are they typically arranged in, like, perpetuity? Like, that's usually how it works?
Not in advertising, but in film and television.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, we only have a minute or so left, so can we just sort of tick off a couple of the other alternative sources of getting your music used that we kicked around as we were preparing for this panel? Josh, I know you had a couple of suggestions.
I had
for
a
folks.
ton of them. Certainly, think about things that you can do for free. For people that are looking for music. So you talked about documentary filmmakers or people developing careers. Sometimes restaurants are looking for music, you know. There's
You mean like to play in the restaurant or because they want to make a commercial?
No, to play in the restaurant. So kind of like an environmental or an industrial use, if you will. One suggestion that I have to a lot of people that are younger in school, I teach and sometimes speak in schools, is find like kind of someone to partner with, to grow with, you know? Think about like the relationship, this is the extreme obviously, that Steven Spielberg has with John Williams, you know? Steven Spielberg has become one of the most significant filmmakers, but he wasn't in the beginning, and he developed this relationship with John Williams, and apparently John Williams is the only guy that can tell Steven Spielberg anything. He won't listen to anyone else. He has his own vision. It's not like he's an ass, but you know, they have this relationship of trust. Think about things also like kind of charity organizations that are looking for money. Sometimes the Ad Council, we don't really pay when we do kind of things for the Ad Council for some PSA, a public service announcement. We don't pay for the music. Oftentimes we're asking people to do favors, but that's an opportunity for somebody to get their music out there. There's a variety of different things.
You talked about some notes here.
I really like what you said about being in the facility. I think if you know editors and you know people who are trying to deliver product, and again, thinking about filmmakers and editors who are trying to make their independent films, and they pay for that by gigging on commercials and gigging on big films and gigging on all kinds of projects. And if you know an editor who's looking for music and they know they can come to you and put that temp music, maybe you'll get the temp love. But also they're familiar and can advocate for your music on pieces as well.
Josh, you sent over a note, say, use the OK Go method.
Oh, yeah.
What's that?
Well, come up with a great creative idea. They made these amazing videos, and that's how they broke. They've been around for a while. Their music is exceptional. They're really fun to see live. But the reason they broke, and I'm always talking about how people break, is they came up with this creative idea on how to, they worked in partnership with a director that was looking to do something super creative, and they did this slew of really super amazing videos. So that's what I think. You know, it's kind of thinking not outside the box, but even like outside of the box. Just kind of like you're really creative, you're passionate. Who can you work with? Who can you collaborate with that's also passionate, that has some kind of access to technology, to tools to make really super creative stuff?
I'd call it also at this point, the Tank and the Bangas method too, because their success with that NPR Tiny Desk concert was phenomenal. You know, on my Facebook newsfeed is very much like New Orleans and then also New York and LA. And I saw several music supervisors reposting that specific concert and saying, this is amazing, this band is amazing. So I think they probably have some sync money.
Well, that's actually, and we have an interview with Tank and the Bangas here next Friday.
Yeah, no, I know, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
They won that contest with a video they filmed in like the Clark High School
High School
art room.
Yeah.
Like
yeah, and
It's
it made
actually
a big impact.
Yeah,
It
and
really
it's
did.
kind of, the video itself is kind of like,
No.
Yeah.
So it's kind of amazing that it won that big contest.
Yeah, they're just so unique, and it was able to expose them to such a wide audience.
Okay, well, I'm afraid that we have to make room for our next panel, but just to wrap up, so we need to make sure that our rights are covered, so that your music, so the master use and the publishing are both fully sewn up,
Yeah.
properly registered, and so on, so whoever needs to clear the music can do it with one phone call, ideally. We didn't really talk about pricing. I mean, I'm sure people easily can price themselves out of this market by thinking that, hey, it's visual media, I can score huge bucks with this, but we're actually talking about like low budget, finding a way to break
That's
in.
how you start. That's how it starts.
So it's more about exposure than it is for the money.
Yeah, and it
For
grows.
sure.
Then the money comes. You know, once you get to a certain level, then you command certain fees.
You get a good break, like one of the people in one of these spots. You get a break, it just kind of happens, and then all of a sudden you have a profile.
All right, so
And befriend filmmakers.
befriend filmmakers.
We're nice.
Hug filmmakers.
Hug a filmmaker today.
All right, well, everybody, can you please thank Sarah Bromberg, Darcy McKinnon, and Josh Rabinowitz.